match for the wicked.
A little bit of the old Allison starts to come out as the investigation into Nolan's murder takes flight. So let's break down episode 2 of The Perfectionists and find out just what happened. What's going on, you lovely people? Lisa here to talk all about the second episode of the Pretty Little Liars spin-off, The Perfectionists. So this episode finds Mona and Allison kind of slipping into some old habits as the Perfectionists scramble to find an alibi for the night of Nolan's murder and try to figure out if they can actually work together. So this episode also does give us a little bit of an update on our original liars. We find out this episode that Caleb and Hannah are happy together and they have a little bit of a baby. They have a little baby, and we also find out that Spencer and Toby have eloped. So it seems like all of those couples were endgame, which we kind of knew, but now we know exactly where they are. But let's go ahead and recap this episode. So our perfectionists are still very much worried about Nolan's death, and all fingers at some point, pointing at them. We pick up 3 days after Nolan's death, and Caitlin has put all of her focus into training for track and feels guilty about being relieved that Nolan is gone. Her boyfriend Jeremy tells her she doesn't have to feel bad and it's okay to feel relieved. He's always been kind of suspect, right? Dylan has been having nightmares remembering his hookup with Nolan and almost lets it slip that Nolan was blackmailing him to Andrew, but saves it just in time because, sexy time is a great distraction on these shows. Ava is the one handling this the worst, obviously. She's having flashbacks remembering the nice things that Nolan said as well as some of the bad things, but she's locked herself up in her room and has been drinking heavily and doesn't really want anything to do with Caitlin and Dylan. Caitlin and Dylan realize they need to band together right now to continue, to present that they're Nolan's perfect posse for this funeral to keep suspicion off of them. But then things take a turn when the news says that Nolan's death has now been ruled a homicide. So this sends Caitlin and Dylan scrambling even more. Andrew asks Dylan if anyone else knows that Dylan was writing Nolan's papers and brings up Dylan's paper on And Then There Were None, because, it could make him look a little bit suspicious. But Dylan plays it off like his paper was written about the bullies in high school. Now Caitlin's also worried about her paper because Allison knew it was about Nolan, and Caitlin says her whole life this past year has been a lie, and she starts freaking out that, people are gonna come, call her out for this, especially also since her, idea of how to kill Nolan is the one that was acted out. Caitlin and Dylan then finally go to Ava's room to tell her that they didn't kill Nolan, and they have to continue this charade at the funeral because they all have secrets that can make them look guilty. Although Ava seems to think that she's the only one with nothing to hide. They all, however, do show up at the funeral, even though it's tough for Ava to see Mrs. Hotchkiss console Caitlin over Nolan's death. And they all go sit up front, and that's where we finally meet another one of Nolan's friends. But he's not a current friend, he's an old friend, a childhood friend named Mason, who seems to have had a falling out with Nolan. They're no longer close, and guess what? He also dated Caitlin in the past. And Dylan seems to think that Mason looks a little too sad and could be crying some crocodile tears or putting on an act. Now, as if ruling Nolan's death being a murder didn't have our perfectionists freaking out or on edge enough, enter Dana Booker, who's standing there waiting for them at the end of the funeral service. Ava thinks Dana is there to bug her because Dana is actually the FBI agent who was on Ava's dad's case. But nope. Turns out Dana is there to bug all three of them now because she is the new head of security at BHU. How convenient, right? Yeah, she's now determined to find out who killed Dylan and bring them to justice, and the fact that she specifically waited for the sanctuary to clear out and waited for those three, yeah, you know who is on the top of her suspects list. Now Ava fills Caitlin and Dylan in on who exactly Dana Booker is, and now they gotta figure out if Nolan actually kept any of their secrets, like if he wrote anything down or had a phone or something like that. Ava tells them that Nolan used to hide his weed behind a brick in the old greenhouse, so at the wake, Dylan and Caitlin are about to go search for that in the greenhouse when Mason pops out of nowhere wanting to talk to Caitlin, so Dylan ends up having to go off by himself to search. Now Mason and Caitlin catch up, and then Mason says something pretty suspect. He tells Caitlin that if she needs an alibi for the night of Nolan's murder, he'll be happy to back her up because they're all going to need alibis until the killer is found. Meanwhile, Dylan does go find that brick, and he finds a note waiting for him, and yeah, it means that someone beat them to whatever was stashed there. So now their secrets could be out. Or maybe it was just a stash of weed the person took and left that note just to freak them out. Ava then catches up with Dylan and Caitlin at Nolan's memorial on campus, and Dylan says that someone beat them to the stash and they knew they were coming. They then hear this creepy whisper say, "It's just how you imagined it. And it seems like they're all of a sudden the only three to hear this creepiness, and they're freaked out. So they return to the woods where they were that night, where they discussed how to kill Nolan, and they find some gum wrappers proving they weren't alone. More than ever now, Dylan and Caitlin say they have to all stick together, but Ava still thinks the only person she can count on is herself, and she doesn't need them. So she returns home with another bottle of alcohol, but finally does see that Caitlin and Dylan called and left messages for her, and she doesn't delete them this time. She actually listens to them, and they are like, look, if you need someone to talk to, we're here for you. So Ava listens to those messages and ends up crying herself to sleep. So now let's pause with our perfectionist to catch up with our two liars. So Allison calls campus security to, say that someone came into her house to fix some wallpaper without permission, but now she needs someone to actually come repair the wall. And it turns out that they have no record of anybody coming to her house. So she's just like, everything is suspect at this damn school. And then she gets a very interesting text. It's from Nolan saying to meet him because he needs her help. And yeah, Allison's kind of like, WTF, because this kid's dead, right? So she goes to the one person she knows can try to figure this stuff out, and that is Mona. And you see Mona's apartment like covered in notes, and Mona's sitting there writing algorithms on mirrors and whatever. And Allison shows Mona the text she got and says that she thinks someone's messing with her like how A did. Now Mona thinks this was a network malfunction because the text actually was sent before he died, so something must have delayed it 3 days or so. But yeah, this does make it look like Allison maybe killed Nolan. Mona then goes back to working on her formulas, and I realized I hate that sound of markers on mirrors and surfaces like that so much. That little squeaking is just so annoying. But while Mona returns to her formulas, Allison goes to get food, and when she returns, she comes back with, of course, some pie, but Mona is in full-on beautiful mind mode, like in another like state personality kind of thing, and Allison ends up having to slap Mona out of it to get Mona back. But we do learn from Mona that she feels like she's responsible for Nolan's death because he should have never been at BHU in the first place. You see, the program and the algorithm that Mona made, it flags personality traits. Her algorithm flagged Nolan's personality traits as being a person who could push another student to the point of snapping. Well, Mona ignored those red flags and didn't tell Claire Hotchkiss about it, so she feels like she ended up creating a killer, and now she is determined to look at her code to find out who maybe has snapped. Now, Allison is actually thinking of telling the police about this delayed text and stuff, but Mona is kind of like, where's the old Allison?
For a second, you reminded me of the Allison I used to know. The one who ruled her world because she played by her own rules. This is my fresh start. I get that you're trying to fake it till you make it, but that Pollyanna suit you're wearing, it's never gonna fit.
Now at the funeral, Allison sits with Mona, and Mona tells Allison that there was actually a partial beacon guard blackout at the time of Nolan's murder. How convenient, right? And a handful of cameras went out, and cell phone service also went out, which pretty much means no one can prove Allison was at her house, and no one can prove Allison wasn't at her house, so she kind of has no proof for her alibi. So then back at Mona's apartment, again, Allison is wondering why Nolan would trust her or someone would want to frame her for his murder. She really needs Mona's help, and in order for Mona to help, she tells her that she's got to, not slip back into her beautiful mind state. She needs to stay connected to reality and people. And Mona says that she is connected to people, and she points out a chessboard where she says she plays chess with someone every night. The person isn't there, that it's an online thing. But we later do have a scene of Mona trying to stay connected to reality by calling Hanna to check in, which I mentioned earlier. So then Allison goes to try to prepare for class to resume the next day, and she ends up meeting Dana Booker, who brings up how conveniently timed it is that Allison is teaching and then there were none, and the class wrote papers trying to, maybe justify murder. And so now Dana really wants to read all these papers, but Allison's like, well, unfortunately for you, I don't have hard copies right here. They're all on my desktop, so we kind of have to wait. So then Allison returns home, and there's a surprise waiting for her. Creepy Claire Hotchkiss is sitting in the dark drinking because she finds comfort in the house since it's where Taylor used to live before Taylor's suicide. But did you all catch this little misstep of Claire's?
I know it's inappropriate for me to be here, but this was my daughter's house before she went missing, before she took her life.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe Claire knows that her daughter isn't actually dead, and maybe this is why this chaos is happening. Maybe Claire was specifically watching Nolan because she knew that Nolan was probably contacting Taylor, and then things maybe just went a little bit too far, and now she's feeling guilty and putting on this sob act. I don't know, but Claire ends up telling Allison all about how Taylor changed once she started teaching at BHU and ended up becoming more paranoid and delusional. I wonder why, Mom. How about your creepy big brother security? Claire also tells Allison about how Nolan and Taylor were so close and, you know, as kids used to also gang up against her, so I feel like Allison's kind of sitting there like, okay, I'll play along with you, but why do I remind you so much of your daughter? And I can totally understand why she would become paranoid at this school. Anyway, the next day when Allison's class resumes, the perfectionists take their seat and Ava texts Caitlin and Dylan saying thanks for their messages. So it seems like these three might actually start getting along now and working together. But then Dana Booker shows up wanting to talk to the three of them, and yeah, Allison's not too happy about this. But Booker pulls them all outside and she asks for their alibis for the night of Nolan's murder. And just as the trio start to kind of stumble over their words, Allison walks out to save the day, saying that the three of them came over that night to bring her a welcome basket. And well, Allison, she's a talker and she got talking and talked to them all night. And you know what? There's no proof of it because the cameras were down, right? Well, Dana's kind of like, fine, you may have won this round, but I'm not going to let you, win the next one. I'm going to catch you on your mistakes at some point, and this won't happen again. And I just got to play this part again. I know I played it at the beginning of this video, but I just love it so much with the way the three look at Allison like, oh, did she just do that?
Bring it on, bitch.
For the wicked.
And thus ends our main events of this week's episode. So we still don't know exactly if Mona's talking to Beacon Guard in the mirrors, where her safe place is, if she's working with someone else to maybe expose Beacon Guard. Don't know her true intentions just yet, but she is kind of like going in between some personalities and working real hard to figure this mystery out. I do love that Allison's little badass side kind of came back out, and she's like the mama bird to these baby little perfectionists. But who was trying to frame Allison, or did Nolan really text her? Because we did see Nolan make some calls asking for help, saying I need your help, leaving messages. Wouldn't Allison have, referenced those if she was the one that he was actually calling? So yes, someone's definitely trying to frame Allison, I think. I'm just really not trusting anybody in this show right now, especially not Jeremy, Andrew, or Mason either. They're pretty much making it seem like everybody's a suspect, which is kind of expected because you know what? Everyone seems to have a motive or a reason to want Nolan dead, except for, of course, Allison. Claire Hotchkiss, still pretty creepy, but would she kill her own son? The way she talked about how Taylor and Nolan would team up against her, I maybe wouldn't put it past her. This episode, though, we didn't really get to know much more about Taylor and her little technology lair in the woods, but I'm hoping that we get to learn more very soon because I'm curious about it. We did have that Mini Cooper follow Nolan up there, so someone knows she's up there probably. And hopefully we get to see more of that soon. But let's go ahead and watch a promo for the next episode.
I'm locked out of BHU's network. Why? Suspicious activity on my account.
But we need to do our own suspicious activity.
We have to find out who killed Nolan before Dana finds a way to destroy us. Nolan came here the night that he died.
What was he doing?
Some blonde woman.
Whoever did this is smart enough to pin this murder on anyone they want. I think I know who was in the woods that night.
Alright, so that pretty much wraps up my recap for this week's episode of The Perfectionists. Are you still liking the show so far? Do you have any thoughts or theories, or are you leaning towards, one person being the killer over another? What do you think about the whole Taylor, Claire, Hotchkiss thing, and even Mona? What do you think Mona is really up to, actually? Let me know all your comments, thoughts, and theories down below, and after that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and check out more of my recaps and interviews right over here. As always, I'm Lisa. Thanks for hanging out with me and listening to me probably ramble about nonsense. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time.